Hello, thank you so much for visiting my channel, Think Like a Virtuous Woman, where I inspire women to think like the woman in Proverbs 31, both spiritually and financially. Today, I'm going to talk to you about why you need an emergency fund, why an emergency is absolutely non-negotiable. And some of you may say, well, what does having an emergency fund have to do with the woman in Proverbs 31? Well, we know by her life that she was great with money. We know she had multiple streams of income, and we know that she took good care of her family. So there's no doubt in my mind that she had something stashed away for a rainy day. So let me just tell you what an emergency fund is. An emergency fund is money that you set aside in case of an emergency. It's self-explanatory. And the reason why you need an emergency fund is because things happen. You put that money away for a rainy day. We know that rain is eventually going to come. Even though we don't like it, we know it's coming eventually. Rainy days, they come. Emergencies happen, car troubles, things going on in the house. Anything can happen. So it's very important to have a set amount set aside for a rainy day. Now, I take the advice of Dave Ramsey. I do follow him. He is a believer. He is great with money. He has hit rock bottom and built himself back up. So he is someone that I do follow, and I've been following for a while. And my financial situation have gotten a lot better since following him. And I took his advice on starting an emergency fund. And the ideal emergency fund is to have at least 3 to 6 months of expenses saved up in case something happened. If you lose your job, you will be okay for at least 3 to 6 months. But if you can't do that right away, at least start off with $1,000. If you can start off with $1,000, then that will probably cover most of your expenses, if not for an entire month. So this past weekend, my emergency fund came in handy. I never had to dip in it before, but this past weekend, my daughter and I, we broke down on the side of the road. I was out there for 4 hours. I was able to call roadside assistance, and I got help. But the thing is, not only did I need a new battery, but I also needed a brand new alternator. Now, if I did not have my emergency fund, I would have had to dip into my personal money that I was not prepared to use for an emergency. But because I had that emergency fund that was easily accessible, I was able to go and transfer that money to my checking account, get my battery and alternator, and also pay the mechanic to put it in for me. This is why that emergency fund is so important to have. One of the tips that I can give you on starting an emergency fund, if you don't have $1,000 to just throw in an account right now, start a auto system where every time you get paid, maybe $15 to $20 can go in that account. If you can do more, do more. If you can't do 15 to 20, maybe 5 or 10. Anything is better than nothing, because those rainy days, like I said, is going to come, and that money comes in handy. That way you don't have to touch your regular income. So automate it. It doesn't have to be. I know I'm very big on online banking. You don't on online bank accounts, you don't have to use an online bank account for an emergency fund. It doesn't need to be an interest-bearing account. It just needs to be a separate account, an account separate from what you use for your daily expenses, for your bills, that you can easily access in case of an emergency. Some people use cash for an emergency fund. I simply use a separate bank account, and I'm able to transfer that money over. You need to have that money set aside so that when things happen, because they are, not if an emergency happens, but when an emergency happens, you'll have that money. And I will do a separate video on why having multiple bank accounts is so important, very beneficial. I will do that later. I hope this video was helpful to you. Again, emergency bank account, you can start off with $5 or $10 if you have to, $25 to $50 every time you get paid. When you automate, you never see that money. If you can set it up with your job to have that money transferred into a separate account every time you get paid, you'll never miss the money. And if you can do at least $1,000, you should be straight. If you can, 3 to 6 months is ideal. But if you can't, start off at $500 and maybe work your way up to $1,000. But it's so important. It is a non-negotiable. We all need it because emergencies will happen. I hope this video was helpful. Please feel free to share it with someone if you feel that they would benefit from it. And feel free to like this video and subscribe.